Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Torres. I'll be your host today. We are talking Atlanta Braves on today's episode. We'll be joined by Stephen Tolbert, who is the co-host of the Hammer Territory podcast and also writes about the Braves at Battery Power, which is part of the SB Nation MLB network. I'm going to be joined by my usual co-host here in a second, Dave Funnel. Mike could not join us today. He is off sending his daughter to college, her first day. I don't understand, Dave. I mean, do people like have their priorities in order? Mike is putting that, sending his daughter to college over our podcast. I mean, what is going on here?
It's unfathomable. I mean, I've got 3 kids fighting and crying, and I'm just leaving them to join you here. So
That's right. Like a good father would. All
exactly.
right. So, yeah, we'll see if Mike has any other family obligations he's got to do next week, but hopefully he will be back with us then. But let me bring in Stephen. Again, Stephen is the co-host of the Territory podcast and writes at Battery Power. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. How are you?
What's up, guys? I appreciate the invite. It's always fun to talk baseball, even though it's not going the way the Braves season. The Braves hoped it would this season. The worst day talking about baseball is still better than most. So I appreciate you guys having me.
100%.
Mhm.
Stephen, if you could just start out by telling us a little bit about your podcast and your writing at SB Nation.
Yeah, so Hammer Territory is the name of our podcast. We're part of the Foul Territory Network. That's, Ken Rosenthal, Scott Braun, AJ Przinsky, all those guys is the Foul Territory. That's the flagship show. And then branched off of that is a bunch of team shows. The Dodgers, the Cardinals, the Mets, the Braves. There's probably 10 plus or at this point, maybe more than that. Actually, it seems like we get a new one every week. So yeah, we just have a kind of this whole network of podcasts. And for us, we were originally, part of a different network. We came over in May of last year. So there's 4 hosts on our show, me and Brad Rowland, Scott Coleman, Sean Coleman. And yeah, we've been covering the Braves. I mean, we've been doing podcasts for the Braves for years and years and years now. And then in the last 2 years, we've joined the Foul Territory guys and started Hammer Territory covering the Braves.
Very cool. Yeah, our buddy who's been on the show many times, Jack Summers.
Yeah.
It's over on Snakes Territory.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems like the Foul Territory Network is definitely expanding and keeps adding talent here. Awesome. Well, by the way, do you play fantasy baseball or
I have.
strictly
I played fantasy baseball probably 6 or 7 years in a row, starting or ending probably last year. I got into so many leagues that I really started not being able to pay attention to them at the level that I should. And so I kind of went cold turkey where I cut them all.
Got it.
I'm probably going to start back slowly, going back to like 2 leagues. We've actually talked about the Foul Territory guys, the Hammer Territory guys doing, like a whole league one year. It's a lot. Yeah, obviously, you guys know with baseball, it's literally a daily, it's a daily responsibility that you really have to. I hate signing on to something and not doing it like extremely well or being all in on it. And baseball, fantasy baseball, you really have to be on top of it on a daily basis. So, but I love fantasy. I mean, fantasy sports are one of my favorite things. Obviously, football season's coming up. Everybody plays fantasy football, but I've always loved fantasy baseball. And so, shows like this where we cover, the minutia of baseball, the day-to-day stuff is some of my favorite content.
Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, I know the struggle, man, especially now this time of year, like when
Yeah.
you got a lot of leagues and you're trying to manage
Yeah.
everything and
Dog days of August are not
the
just for
dog
players.
days, right? They're not just for baseball players. We got it pretty tough too, man. Like all these buttons we got to click.
Somebody's got to think of the fantasy players, man.
Someone has got to think about us. Absolutely. Yeah, so I hear you. Hopefully, you can listen to our podcast and get some good tips when you get back into the fantasy baseball stuff. But Anyway, and we'll be incorporating obviously a lot of fantasy information throughout this discussion. But let's start with someone who is having just a wild season and has been a really frustrating player to have rostered in fantasy. Let me tell you, I'm loving it now. But a couple weeks ago, we alluded to this player, and I wouldn't even allow his name to be spoken on this podcast because of how annoyed I was with his season. And that is, as our listeners can probably guess, is Michael Harris, who is just having an unreal hot streak right now. Just every time I look, actually, the past two games, we're recording this on Thursday, it seems like he's actually gone. I think he went hitless yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. But before that, it was like every time I opened up a box score, it was Michael Harris either hitting a home run and or stealing a base, and the dude was just on fire. So I want to start there. Steven, what are your thoughts on his season so far? Is this just a player that he is just really streaky and what we should expect moving forward? Just give us your overall assessment of Michael Harris.
Yeah, as a Braves fan, and obviously if you have him in fantasy, you know how frustrating of a season it's been. As a Braves fan, actually watching him play every game, it's actually been one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. Like, Michael was legitimately maybe the worst hitter in baseball for the first 3.5 months of the season. He had a sub 600 OPS. He was, the peripherals were even scarier than that. The walk rate has just been abysmal. But even like the metrics that kind of project forward weren't all that encouraging. And so there was a lot of conversation, of course, in Braves land about, this guy is signed to a long-term deal. The Braves went ahead and guaranteed him, $70+ million. What's going on? He's healthy. Like, why is he so bad? No one could figure it out. And his big thing is he swings at everything. He has very little plate discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And then boom, All-Star break hits. They come out of the gate. And since the All-Star break, I think Michael Harris has been like the second best hitter in baseball. And so,
right up there, I think, with Nick Kurtz, right? Like him,
Yeah.
Kurtz, and Langelier is like the three best players since the break.
He's got I think 1100 OPS or something. It's literally night and day from what we've seen in the first half. I will say this, for fantasy players, one thing I would be aware of is that for his career, Michael has a mid 600 OPS in the first half, and in the second half has a OPS over 900. So like, this is a pattern we've seen. Now, some of that has been injury related, but for whatever reason, when he gets back from the All-Star break, I don't know what this guy does over the All-Star break. He needs to start doing it in May is what he needs to do. But when this dude gets back from the All-Star break, he's the best hitter in baseball, and he's done it multiple years now. And it's incredibly frustrating. And no one can figure out why, but that's where we are right now, where you're just having to live with some of the most extreme highs and lows of a player I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. I've never seen a player go from being the worst. He was one of the worst hitters in baseball in that first half. And just to see him go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Dave, do you believe in that? Like, this idea that there are some players that for whatever reason, they have these first half, second half splits where they just start off really poor and then they turn it on in the second half of the season. Do you think that's just variance? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I do think there are players like that. I know Julio Rodriguez is like that as well. They just start out very slow, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's, getting towards your team and then, getting in the rhythm of traveling again, if that's an issue, or it could just be the cold weather at the beginning of the year. I mean, the month of March and April is typically very cold no matter where you go. So I do believe in these kinds of streaks, and it's important to try and capitalize on that and know that, like Steven said, there's a pattern here with Michael Harris, and for whatever reason it is, he struggles to start the year. And whether or not we know why, maybe that's not the biggest concern in fantasy, but it's something that we could use maybe next year as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too if a player with Harris's profile, one who we know there's a lot of chase in his game, right? He's got one of the highest O swing percentages in the league. You see these types of players where they're very volatile. Even looking at a guy like Pete Crow Armstrong, right? That was the knock on him, and started out blistering hot. He was the opposite, right? He started out
Yeah.
blistering hot, picking up a little bit here recently, but then he went through a pretty prolonged stretch where he was really struggling. So I don't know. We don't necessarily there. I think baseball. There is just so much randomness, and I don't think we'll ever be able to say definitively what all of that is about. But I
And
think
I'll say
go ahead.
this.
Yeah.
I'll say this. Guys who don't draw walks, and Michael Harris is in that category. I think Pete Crow Armstrong is in that category. Guys
Mm-hmm.
who run really low walk rates, they don't have. So, like guys like Aaron Judge, Ronald Acuna Jr., Juan Soto, they always draw so many walks that even when they're going bad, the floor for their production is always really high
Right.
because they're always going to run really high on base percentages, which is always going to carry their overall numbers. The guys that don't draw walks, and again, Michael is one of the lowest walk rates in the majors. They don't have that. They don't have that floor that protects them. It can just bottom out, and all of their production is tied to whatever their batted ball numbers are doing. Randomness, batted ball luck, all that stuff just completely drives their production, which leads just to more volatility. And so, from
Mm-hmm.
a fantasy perspective, I've become somebody who believes very much in walk rate as a predictor of offensive consistency. And when you're drafting players that have historically low walk rates, you just got to expect high levels of volatility relative to batted ball data because batted ball data is volatile in itself.
Mm-hmm. That's a
And
good point.
I think you see that across bit. And like you said, Pete Crow Armstrong is another example, another guy who does not draw a lot of walks. So walk rate, I think, is a pretty good indicator of offensive consistency. Maybe not complete offensive talent, but at least offensive consistency where there's a floor that you're never really going to go below because you're always running, a high on base percentage.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's probably been, now that I think about it, a little bit of a weakness in my game and the way I approach fantasy because I play pretty much only roto. So my mindset has always been, well, I'm okay with these low walk guys, as long as the other production is there. But I think you make a good point, Steven, that if they have a good walk rate, that's at least going to give them that floor. You're getting something when they go through, even when there's a stretch where the balls aren't, their BABIP is low, or things are not going their way. There's still something there to grab onto that's going to keep them afloat. So probably something that I need to be more cognizant of moving forward. To wrap it up on Michael Harris, Dave, is this someone, knowing what we know about him now, and now that we kind of spot these trends with him? Are you going to be willing to invest in him next year?
Um, I think so. I mean, looking at it right now, you could argue that his season right now, as of this moment, is better than last year. Last year, he was 16-10 with a 264. This year, he's 16-14 with a 257. So, and he still has another, 5 or 6 weeks to go. I think he's a 2020 player. Now, last year, he was around pick 40 or 41. I think that's too high for me, but I think I would take him a couple rounds later if that is the price, because he is someone who can provide what I think he can provide help in all 5 categories. So I would
Okay.
invest.
All right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he lands next year. And if he continues anywhere near this pace, I mean, we might be drafting him again in that 3-4 turn like we did this year. But all right, let's talk about someone who has been a major disappointment for fantasy players, and that's Spencer Strider. Um, I don't know, Steven, to me, he just looks broken. Like everything, the surface numbers look bad. He's got a 5.24 ERA, a 1.43 whip. The stuff plus, all these underlying metrics do not look like he's the same guy. What are your thoughts on him? First of all, give us I guess, your overall thoughts on his struggles this year, what you think it is, and if you think the Braves are just going to continue running him out there.
Well, the answer to your second question is easy. The Braves are 100% going to keep running him out there because they gave him a long-term contract. So he's owed $20 million next year, $20 million the year after that, and $20 million the year after that. So as long as he's healthy, which is not a given, certainly with Spencer, because he's already had 2 major elbow surgeries in his career. As long as he's healthy, he's going to play. Now, in terms of the quality of Spencer Strider, it is very clear that when he came back from the injury, he did not have the same fastball. And, a guy who lives on probably a 60% usage rate on that fastball, and B, the whiffs that he got off that fastball to set up everything else, that's been a big deal. And, in our world, in Braves world, the whole thing has been, if you look at Spencer, he's very clearly a guy who spends a lot of time in the weight room, even though he's not the tallest guy in the world. He's built like a statue. And over the last year, because he's been rehabbing an elbow, he hasn't been able to lift the same way. He's a guy that draws a lot of his velocity from his lower half. And the conclusion has really been the only fair thing to do in terms of projecting him long-term going forward is we got to give him an off season of being able to lift, of having a throwing program, and seeing when we get to spring training of 2026 if some of that velocity has come back, because he's a dude that used to throw 99, 100, 101, and guys couldn't hit it. And now he's a guy throwing like 95, 96, 97. And then that might not sound like a huge difference to some people, but that's like 2 or 3 miles an hour on your fastball. That's massive. It's a massive deal. And you can look at the way hitters have responded to that fastball this year. They're just not worried about it. They're not scared of it. In the past, he would just throw it by everybody. So they had to sit on that fastball, which made his slider better. Well, now they don't have to sit on the fastball because they know they can get it no matter what. So that makes the slider worse. So it's a cascading effect of all of his pitches are worse because the fastball is not the same, and hitters don't have to respect it the same. And so it's been bad this year. There's no doubt about it. It's been bad. The underlying metrics are rough. He's getting lit up. It's not just, high ERA. It's homers, it's doubles, it's high exit velo. Like, he's getting lit up. And so the prevailing thought in Braves land is, all right, we got to let this dude have an offseason, see what he looks like in spring training next year. Does any of the velocity come back? And if it doesn't, what are the adjustments that he makes with this being his kind of new reality of what he has to throw?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, what you said too about him being a guy who just, he's someone you could tell is in the weight room, and, and him being injured, whatever limitations he had, thinking about what that effect might have been in terms of his ability to condition his body and get it to the place where, it needs to be for him to be throwing 100 miles an hour, and having that dominant fastball. Yeah, I think, me personally, I feel like this is, if you're in a dynasty league, this is a good opportunity to buy Spencer Strider. I feel like if we give him that offseason to, now that he's going to be farther removed from the internal brace procedure, I feel like he's going to get back to the player that he was. I mean, he's still young. He's 26 years old. The Braves, like you said, are heavily invested in him. So I definitely would be willing to buy. Dave, are you on the same wavelength? Or I know how cautious you are. Our nickname for Dave Steven is Davy Downer, because he's always throwing cold water on, and looking for the potential negative. Am I off base in wanting to buy Spencer Strider, Dave?
No, I actually, I think you're on point, because for a few reasons. The year after having, Tommy John or whatever surgery as the internal brace, it's that first year, I find a lot of pitchers, they have so much trouble adapting to their new style of what they can and cannot do. So I think, like you said, once he gets a full off season, and especially working with this Braves staff, I mean, this is one of the teams that when they pick up a pitcher, I pay attention, because they know how to develop pitching so well. So they're smart. They'll know exactly what needs to be done. As long as Strider can listen and adapt to what needs to be done, I think it's a perfect time to buy for next year.
Mm-hmm. All right. This is probably as low as the cost is going to be. I was listening to your last podcast, Stephen. I think it was released yesterday, and you had a quote that I wrote down. You said the Braves have to survive Spencer Strider starts so that they could thrive in Hurston Waldrep starts, which I thought was amusing, and it is pretty wild that we're at this point. And it makes sense because Hurston Waldrep, another really strong start yesterday, going 7 innings against oh boy, I almost slipped up there. The White Sox with 7 strikeouts. Tell us a little bit about Hurston Waldrep, what you're seeing from him, and what you think we could expect from him moving forward.
Yeah, and what has been a pretty miserable season for the Braves overall, and a kind of an upside down season, and that was the origins of that quote. Is just in no world, back in March would any Braves fan ever feel like they would have to just survive Spencer Strider starts so they could enjoy Hurston Waldrep starts, because it's just not the trajectory of those two guys coming into the season. But Hurston is a prime example of the Braves are a really good, one of the best teams in baseball at developing pitching, because he'd kind of hit a roadblock in AAA where the fastball was not nearly as good. It was not nearly as competitive. Guys were teeing off on it. He's always had this really good splitter, but the Braves changed his delivery. They changed his repertoire a little bit, where he's now throwing this splitter, slider, curveball mix that has been nasty. I mean, it's been nasty, and it's allowed him to use his fastball more because hitters really can't sit on the fastball. He throws so many splitters and so many sliders and so many curveballs. There's been some research out about how he tunnels them, how they're coming out of the same arm slot. They're very hard to distinguish from one another, and they move in different directions. And so, since he's come up, he's got an ERA under 1. He's got a 0.73 ERA, striking out more than a guy per inning. Very few walks. He's really improved the command. And listen, this is a first-round pick. I mean, this is a guy that had high pedigree. Is one of the best college pitchers in baseball, for Florida a few years ago. It shouldn't be stunning that this guy's having success, but for a lot of Braves fans, we watched him really struggle at AAA and kind of hit a wall there. And the fastball was so unusable and so hittable that there was long-term questions about whether it might be better to put Waldrep in the bullpen just so he could use that splitter more. And what they've done with him, changing his repertoire, changing his mechanics, he's got better fastball command. It's really just been a testament to their pitching development. And it's been one of the most encouraging developments of the season for the Braves that obviously hasn't had many of those. And yeah, those games are kind of what Braves fans kind of look forward to now is Hurston Waldrep starts. We get to see what this kid is really going to do. And, he's obviously going to be a big part of their future.
Yep. He has been excellent. On that same podcast, you mentioned Rick Kranitz, the Braves pitching coach, and about his role and how you hope that he's back with the Braves, even if they change managers at the end of the year. You feel that he's been instrumental in Waldrep's success and helping some of these pitchers along. If you could just tell us a little bit, because I wasn't even familiar with Rick Kranitz, but if you could tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so he's been the Braves pitching coach a few years now. He came over from Philly. And so listen, the Braves, for people that don't follow the Braves every day, Brian Snitker has been the manager for the last 9 years. Basically this entire run with Alex Anthopoulos, and his contract is up at the end of the year, and there's been zero talk of a new contract, and very rarely do managers of his stature get into like a lame duck status. Typically there's an extension announced. Usually if they're actually playing out their last year, there's going to be a retirement. There's going to be some sort of move to the front office and, some sort of a special advisor role. Brian Snitker's been with the Braves for 50 years. So the prevailing wisdom is that he's going to retire at the end of the year. What that has led to is this understanding that there's probably going to be a decent amount of upheaval in the Braves coaching ranks in the offseason. And what Scott and I were talking about on that show was whatever happens, they need to make sure they keep Rick Kranitz as the pitching coach. I don't know who's going to be the manager. No one knows. I don't know if Rick Kranitz has any interest in being a manager. He's been around the game long enough where he probably could. But the Braves just had so many of these success stories where they bring guys in. Joey Wentz. I mean, look what Joey Wentz has done since he came over. I'm sure you guys on the fantasy side have noticed, like, night and day difference since he came over to the Braves. And the Braves have had so many examples of this kind of stuff happening where very clearly they are one of the best in the league at getting the most out of guys, even at the major league level, not just in the player development minor leagues, but at the major league level, changing guys' repertoires, changing some mechanical stuff. Sean Murphy is one of the best defensive catchers, one of the best game callers in baseball. Like they have a setup where they get the most out of pitchers, and considering they have a hard time keeping a lot of their pitchers healthy, it's crucial that they keep Rick Kranitz. And so that's what Scott and I were talking about. You just can't let this guy go.
Right. So something as fantasy players we should probably pay attention to, like where Rick Kranitz ends up. If he stays with the Braves or if he goes to another organization. The effect if he does go, the effect that he could have on that pitching staff. Something that most fantasy gamers are not really. I know myself, I kind of follow that stuff loosely, but probably should pay more attention because there are just certain organizations that know how to get the best out of their pitchers, and just really paying attention to that, I think, can give you an edge. But we are going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be back with Steven. All right, we are back. Steven, you mentioned Joey Wentz, and we have to talk about him. We talked about him on our show a few weeks ago. Now, listen, I don't want to get Dave all worked up here because this man next to me on the screen has an infatuation with Joey Wentz. He texted me and Mike. We have a group chat. He texted me and Mike. This was probably, what would you say, a month and a half ago, like before Joey Wentz was even, like when he just went to the Braves.
Yeah, that day.
And he texts us, oh, maybe this is a good opportunity for Joey Wentz to start. And I'm like, Joey Wentz? Like, I forgot the guy was even in baseball. I remember he was with the Tigers, and, at one point I was probably interested in him, and then just figured, all right, he's just not a thing, and had moved on. I think most fantasy gamers had, but not Dave. He's been following Joey Wentz's every move for the past couple years, and he was right on it when he went to the Braves. But it turns out that my man, that was a very prescient text because Joey Wentz has been really, really good for the Braves out of nowhere. Steven, do you think Joey Wentz is a guy that they're looking at and would seriously consider as a rotation piece going into next season? Like, what do you see his future being with the Braves?
Yeah, so for people that don't know, Joey Wentz was originally drafted by the Braves. He was part of the when they did their big rebuild in 2014, 15, and 16. They basically acquired 1 million different pitching prospects, and he was one of those guys. And then Alex Anthopoulos traded him to the Tigers in 2019 for Shane Green, and so that's how he ended up with the Tigers. And so, of course, Braves fans have kind of followed along his career just to see former guy that got drafted. I think at one point he was a top 100 prospect for the Braves. So, the Braves fans have known him and followed him. And it was really, in a down season, kind of exciting to see him come back. Now, obviously he was pitching so poorly at the time that no Braves fan had any expectation that he would do anything. But again, he's got this fastball cutter combination that he's really found kind of the right mix of when to use it. And again, I think Rick Kranitz has played a big role in that. He's got the curveball. He's a big kid. Like I think he's 6'5", 220 or something like that. I think he's a huge kid, a huge guy. He doesn't throw, like he's not a huge velocity guy. He's not like 98, 99. He's much more 93, 94, 95, but that cutter plays up so well because he locates it very well. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Joey Wentz is now like a mid-rotation starter. I think that would be irresponsible. There's still some underlying metrics that are a little concerning about how real this is. This would definitely be from a fantasy perspective, this would definitely be a late round sleeper type of guy maybe for next year. I certainly wouldn't be spending any sort of draft capital early on to pick him up, but there's enough interesting stuff there. And again, if he stays with the Braves, stays with Kranitz, if he stays with Sean Murphy, I think it does probably bump his value. But it's been like 7 or 8 starts now of an ERA, under 3, like a 2.6 ERA with the Braves. And underlying metrics that kind of match, striking out almost a hitter per 9, not a lot of walks. There's stuff to lean on that it could be real. I'm still, we're still kind of waiting on the other shoe to drop where the clock strikes midnight and everything turns back into a pumpkin, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's been a good story, that's for sure. And yeah, I mean, right now he is 15 team relevant. I wouldn't say he's not. I don't think he's a guy you're picking up in a 12 teamer. And next year, I don't think there's any way he's someone you're considering in a league of that size to start the year. But definitely in some of these like deeper drafting holds, I could see some interest in late round Joey Wentz. I also just wanted to mention there was an interesting article in The Athletic the other day about this widening gap between left-handed starters, which Joey Wentz is, and right-handers. In 2025, just want to cite a stat in this article. In 2025, lefties have a collective 3.73 ERA. Right-handers, 4.30. So this is an interesting, I don't know if there's anything to that, if that's just randomness or if there's something with the way the game is being played that left-handers have more of an advantage. Are there more lefty hitters? I don't know. I mean, they platoon more, so you would think that wouldn't matter. But just something interesting. Definitely check out that article. It was in The Athletic 2 days ago by Stephen Nesbitt. But
And
yeah, so yeah.
I'll say this about Wentz, because this matters for roster purposes next year. He has no minor league options left. So there's a very good chance if he is with the Braves, he's going to get a rotation spot. Now, I don't know if he's going to be with the Braves, but he's not a guy that can be, shuttled to AAA back and forth all year where you're worried about how many starts and innings he's going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And the Braves, I don't know how other teams operate, but the Braves operate pretty heavily on, they try to keep their depth, and guys who don't have minor league options usually get preferential treatment in terms of the roster, so that guys who do have minor league options can be optioned. Everybody stays, the depth is still strong. So just keep that in mind for next year. That Wentz does not have any minor league options left, and that does matter with this organization.
Well, I know that Ronaldo Lopez said that he wanted to start, right? He said he had zero desire to be in the bullpen. So yeah. I don't know if that would affect.
Well, Ronaldo's got to get healthy first. So
yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of health, can you give us a quick update on where Chris Sale is at in his rehab?
Yeah, so Sale is almost back. He's done 2 or 3 rehab starts now. He's been in AAA, just getting back, getting going. He should be. I mean, I would not be surprised. I think he has one more rehab start tomorrow or the next day. I can't remember exactly which day it is. But then after that, the expectation he's going to be up. He's going to be back up with the majors. I know people have, the Braves are out of it. Why would you push this guy this late in the season in a kind of a lost season? But for Chris Sale, he has said before that being able to finish the season in the majors healthy allows him to have a normal offseason. And a normal offseason is how he sets up, having the kind of 2026 that he wants. And so even though the games don't matter as much for the Braves, getting Chris Sale all the way back up to the majors, letting him start games in the majors, getting, all the way to the end of the season in a normal fashion sets up his offseason. And then that sets up his 2026. So he's going to be back probably. I mean, it might be September 1, he might just be one of the call-ups that happen on September 1. But from a fantasy perspective, I would definitely, start factoring the fact that he's going to be back in probably less than a week and getting regular starts in the Braves rotation.
Yep, and definitely could be an impactful player in this last month here. Continuing with this theme of health and injuries, and I mean, that's really been a major theme of the Braves season here. Ronald Acuna has been part of that. Obviously missed the first couple months of the season coming off surgery. Then he went back on the IL recently, or about a month ago, and now he has returned to play. But with Acuna, I mean, is it time, given all of the health issues that he's had over the past couple years, Steven, is it fair to label him as an injury-prone player at this point, or do you think that might be a little bit unfair to put that label on him?
I no, I mean that's fair. That's 100% fair. He's had 2 major knee surgeries. He's missed, he's been out for the season twice now in 2021 and 2024. He's always had these little nagging injuries. I think that's fair. The big thing is going to be for Ronald is they've been lower body injuries, and so how that affects him, obviously he's an outfielder. There's always been talk in Braves world about at some point does he become the DH? Marcell Ozuna moves on after this year. The Braves technically don't have a DH ready to go. The Braves have not committed to that. They've said he's going to play right field. He's going to be out there. But I love Ronald, of course, as a Braves fan, but of course it's fair to say he's been injury prone. He misses, he's missed significant time in multiple seasons. Probably just off the top of my head, probably 3 of his 7 seasons have had significant injuries. And then even in the other ones, there's always been little nagging injuries. So, injury prone is probably, I know that's kind of a taboo thing and players really don't like being labeled that, but until Acuna stacks a couple of 160, 155 game seasons, I think it's fair. I know he'll say, it's just been these major blowout, knee blowouts, but one happened running the bases, one happened while he was in the field. He's always had kind of calf and hamstring stuff that pops up. So yeah, I think it's fair.
Let's keep him on the field, man, because the skills are just, I mean, they're as good
Yeah.
as ever. He's just rocking the ball. He's got a 16% barrel rate this season.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, he's putting up Ronald Acuna numbers, but the steals are a little less than we would like, but that was to be expected. I think going into the season, we didn't think he would be as aggressive coming off the knee injury.
And I'll say that from a fantasy perspective, I don't know that I would depend on those steals
Yeah.
really ever coming back. The Braves are just going to, even though they're going to play him in right field, they're not going to have him. I mean, he stole in 2023 when he stole 70 something bases, he literally ran every single time he was on first base. He ran every time. He's not going to be that guy. They're not going to let him do that anymore. He picks and chooses his spots now, but like from a fantasy perspective, you should never draft Ronald Acuna Jr. expecting to get 50 plus steals. That I think those days are behind him.
Right. And I think he will be, if you're going off of projections next season, you're probably going to be overvaluing Ronald Acuna because they're going to look at, that 73 stolen base season is probably still going to be factored into the projection. And that's just, like you said, Steven, that's a good point there. That player is not coming back. I'm just looking at that 2023 season. I got it pulled up on Fangraphs. Holy cow. I can't even,
Sure.
I forgot how good that season was.
Well, the craziest thing about that season was he dropped his strikeout rate.
Right.
And he cut it in half.
11% out of nowhere. He was at 24%, and then at 11 that one year, and then right back up to 24 this year.
I mean, it was and didn't sacrifice any power to do it. Like he was still hitting 40 bombs.
Insane.
But somehow had an 11% K rate. It was crazy.
You know what it is, Dave? I think it was just to spite me because I passed on him with the first overall pick. Told you this story many times. I took Trey Turner that year because I had concerns like with Acuna, the way he plays is he's so all out, and he had the prior knee injury, and I'm like, I don't feel great taking him number 1. Turner is more stable, and he just shoved it down my throat, man. Like every day I'd look at the box score, and he was just it was something every day. It was what an incredible season that 2023 was for him.
Well, he took advantage of the base running rule. That was the first year, right?
Yeah. Bigger bases. You couldn't throw over as much. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was year 1 of that.
Yeah. Dave, with your cautiousness when it comes to injuries, is Acuna basically off of your board at this point going into next season?
He pretty much is. I mean, the talent is just, it's out of this world, but for the price where he's going, I think he's going to be a second rounder. And what's alarming to me this year is he only he's only attempted 6 steals so far. So like you said, Stephen, I think those days of 50 are done. But outside of even that 173 year, I mean, 37 was his next highest. So if he's not even running anymore, I think we're struggling to get to 20 perhaps. For a second round guy who's going to give you power and a little bit of speed, I think it's just a little too much simply because of the injury history with the 2 knee injuries. And as someone who's rostered him in the past, there's a lot of day-to-day ailments that are just they're frustrating, and it looks like it's a major injury, but he's back in 3 days because of whatever it was, and it was frustrating. So I would draft him if it was maybe in the 4th round, but I don't think it would get there.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say is when he had the first knee injury, he tore his first ACL in 21, July of 21. He came back in 22, and he was a good player. He wasn't Ronald Acuna Jr., and it wasn't until he had a full off season and then came back in 23 and had the season we were just talking about. Yeah. Well, if you're projecting forward, he tore his ACL in 24, came back in 25. He didn't have a full off season. This is going to be the off season where he has a normal off season. So if you are trying to there's a very good chance 2026 will be the best version of Ronald Acuna Jr. since 2023. So, right. You got to factor it all in, but I do not think he's going to run as much. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. Right. And that's the main reason for me too, is that if he's not going to run as much as we want him, then I think a mid-second round pick is too much.
Yeah, but I think that argument that you brought up, Stephen, that now he has the full off season, and look what he did before, when he had the full off season to recover. I think you're going to hear that argument a lot from fantasy analysts over the off season, and I don't think he's lasting past the second round for that reason. And also just, the name value, the projections are going to look great, and maybe it's worth it. I don't know. But if you're not willing to take him until the 4th round, you will have no Acuna, Dave. I'm pretty confident in that. All right, just a few here as we get ready to wrap up. Did want to ask you, Stephen, over these next 5 or so weeks that we have left, is there anybody in the Braves minor league system that you think could be called up to make an impact during that time?
Well, the Braves just lost Austin Riley for the year. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was announced today that he was having sports hernia surgery. He's been out for a while, so it's not stunning. So he's going to be out for the rest of the year. Nacho Alvarez has been covering third. He's been doing a decent job, but he's more of a utility guy. The Braves don't have a ton of prospects, quite honestly, that are, the guys, like Hurston Waldrop is probably going to be the guy that ends up making the biggest impact in September out of nowhere. They've got a couple of pitching prospects. There's a guy named Hayden Harris who's been just destroying AAA. A lot of Braves fans don't really actually understand why he's not already up, but I think the general consensus he's going to come up as a September guy. Position player wise, they're really thin in the upper minors. They've got a guy named David McCabe who's a third baseman. I actually wondered after the Riley news if maybe they would give him a cup of coffee. He's got some power, but he just got to AAA, so it's unlikely. There's not really. I mean, that's kind of one of the things the Braves have run into is they don't have a ton of upper minor depth. They locked up so many of their position players to long-term deals that they've really focused draft-wise on pitching, and so they have a lot of really good young pitchers. But position players, it's still pretty bleak. Plus, the Braves had the 3 or 4 years of being suspended from any international signings because of the previous regime and some of the stuff they did. So the Braves are just now getting back into being able to sign international players, and so they've just had this kind of hole in the upper minors for position players for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's probably going to be another year or so before we start seeing some real talent come through there. But on the pitching side, they've got some pretty interesting guys that we'll see if they get any run in September.
Mm-hmm. Give me a minute here on Alex Anthopoulos. Do you still believe in him?
I think Alex is still one of the best GMs in baseball. Alex has had a rough probably 12 months, and some of it is not, if you ask Braves fans, there's some curiosity and how much ownership has played a role in potentially limiting his resources. But listen, he gave Jurickson Profar a big contract. Profar immediately got popped for PEDs. And is that Alex's fault? No. I mean, he didn't know, but in a lot of ways, Profar was kind of a one-year wonder in San Diego. So it was a fair question to ask. Now I'll say this, since Profar has come back, and if you want a fantasy guy, I don't know where Profar sat on all the fantasy boards preseason, but since he's come back from that suspension, he's got like an 850 OPS with like
awesome. Yeah.
11 homers. And
yeah.
The reason we were so excited about that Profar signing is because of that short porch in right field in Truist Park. That is absolutely perfect for Jurickson Profar. And that's where he's hit like all of his homers. Like if he stays healthy and, doesn't get suspended again next year, like I think Jurickson Profar could hit 30 homers playing in Atlanta just because of that short porch in right field. So, that wasn't, do you call that a good signing or a bad signing? We'll see. It was a 3-year deal. We'll see. The Chris Sale move, I think, was a stroke of brilliance getting him from Boston. Boston paid his entire contract in 2024, and Chris Sale won the Cy Young. And they gave up a guy that they really didn't have any room for. So I think he's still a very good GM. I think ownership has limited him. It's going to be a critical offseason for the Braves because this is the first time since he's been there that they're not going to make the playoffs. And, how does he respond? And what does he do to the roster? The pitching has so many injury questions. How does he adjust? It's they still haven't been able to find a shortstop since Dansby left. What do they do? It's going to be a fascinating offseason. And there are fans who are starting to waver a little bit on Alex. I'm not there. I still think he's one of the best, but this is going to be a critical offseason for him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Steven, get you out of here on that. But this was great, man. Thank you so much for joining us. If you could just tell our listeners where they could find your work and where they could find you on social media.
Yeah, Hammer Territory is the name of the podcast. Again, we cover the Braves. We have for years now. You just do 3 or 4 shows a week, and it's all part of the Foul Territory Network. Twitter/X is Hammer Territory at all the socials, and then the personal is B_outliers. If you want to follow, if you care about the Braves, come over. We talk about them every night. So, and I appreciate you guys giving us the platform and having me on today. It was fun conversation.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Steven. You take care.
See you guys.
All right. Bye. All right. Oh, I forgot to say we're going to break. All right. Well, whatever. You'll know where to put it in.
Yeah. And honestly, I think we can just go to the mental health. We're 48 minutes in, but it was great stuff.
No, really. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it cool if I ask, like, I'll bring up the posture thing. I didn't really have time to prepare what I wanted to say for it. So, if I ask you just like what you're doing to take care of your mental health, and then if you want to bounce it back at me, and then I'll just bring up the posture thing and we'll end there.
Yeah. You don't want me to talk about posture? I can talk about something else.
Yeah. Just like whatever you're doing, like whatever you got going on personally, if you're, whatever you're doing to try to take care of yourself right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. We are back. We're going to wrap up as usual with our mental health minute. So this is where we move away from baseball talk and do a couple minutes here where we discuss things that we're doing to take care of our mental and our physical health. So Dave, what's been going on, man? How have you been doing? And what have you been doing to maintain your wellness recently?
I'm doing okay. Things are good. I know last week we talked about my baseball teams and how bad they were doing. Something that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to remember when I play fantasy that I'm doing it for fun. And
no, it's not for fun. We're out to win.
I'm talking like a loser here. No,
that's right.
It's because they're in the past. I'll say, like, back in my younger days, I took this game pretty seriously. I played a lot of fantasy baseball, a lot of football, and there were days where if my teams didn't do well, my whole day was ruined. And like, especially with football on a Sunday, I'd be miserable all day. I'd be grumpy with the kids. I'd be grumpy with my wife. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? And last week it started to hit me hard because like I mentioned, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I had the week from hell. But quite honestly, there were days where it hit me hard. And I had to take a step back and just remind myself, A, it's not the end of the world. And B, this is something that I'm doing for fun. I'm trying to have a good time and enjoy baseball with my friends. Yet here I am miserable because, the guy that I picked up went 0 for 4. So for me, what I'm trying to do, if I'm having a bad day on my team, I think to myself, it's going to be fine. Move on to tomorrow. Even if I don't do well, I move on to tomorrow. And I try to just spend time with the family. I try and do other things that clear my mind and just constantly remind myself why I do this. I do it for fun. So for me, my mental health has just been reminding myself it's going to be fine.
It's not that serious, man. In the end, no one's going to care if you finished first or fourth in your baseball league in 2025, your
Yeah.
whatever league in 2025. Like
Yeah.
no one cares. Like the only thing that really matters is how you made people feel, the type of person you like. And I'm not saying that, what you're alone in the way you feel. Cause I've dealt with that too. Like where you get really wrapped up in
Hmm.
the day to day, and baseball especially is really hard. Well, football too, because you know what I don't like about football is that it happens all at once,
Yes.
and it's like it's so those Sundays can be so stressful.
Oh.
When it's going well, it's like the ultimate high, right? When
Mhm.
like your team is doing well, you're like that's a nice dopamine hit, right? In your brain. Like it just feels really good. But yeah, when it's going bad, it feels really bad. And then it's just like you're all over the place because it's just one thing after another. Baseball is
Well,
a little bit more of that slow burn, but
yeah.
because it's every day, for 6 months, like it really it can be kind of taxing if you are not putting in limits and just kind of like reminding yourself it ain't that serious. One limit actually that I've put in place for myself recently, and we talked about this at the beginning of the year, this idea of like not checking box scores as much and not getting, not spending too much time on the phone. And so I've really put a limit on that. Like the app that I would use, it was the Yahoo Sports one. um
Mhm.
I took it off my phone because I'm like, you know what, this is just not it's not healthy for me to even to have this on my phone because it's almost like a compulsive thing. Like if I, I mean, I feel like you go anywhere now, like you just see people, it's habit, right? If you have a down moment, what do? You take out your phone, right? It's almost like my brain, it's become so automatic. I'll just pull my phone out, like if I have a second, and especially during baseball season, I'll open up the box score app, and that's just not healthy. So I took it off my phone. I also recently installed this app, and I know there are several of them out there. It's called Screen Zen. And it's one of those apps where you could put like a timer on how much you spend on these apps and how many times you could open it. And then once you've exceeded that limit, it just blocks you. So yeah, I've had it now and for like a week, and I think it's been helpful. Like at the end of the day, if I look at my screen time, it's much less than it was prior to me putting it on. So gonna try to stay strong because I'm sure there'll be that temptation, be like, oh, it's not so bad, and it's just like go right back to it. But I feel like, especially with the phone, you gotta have to have some kind of limit in
Yeah.
place, and that ties into the whole thing about getting too wrapped up in this because when you're constantly, monitoring every little thing, that's when I think it could become too much, and what you're talking about with the stress of it, and it just it's not, it affects your mental health.
The irony is I teach 4-year-olds that it's okay if you lose at a game or it's okay everyone wins. And yet here I am at night.
Here
Dad,
you
what
are.
are you doing?
Yeah. Mother effing all your players that went 0 for 4 that day.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, but definitely something to just be cognizant of and just give yourself that reminder. But
Yeah.
we're going to leave it there for this week. Thank you again to Stephen Tolbert for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another episode, and hopefully Mike will be with us again. But we'll talk to you next week. For Dave Funnel, for Mike Carter, I am Chris Torres. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Baseball Beat.